Beloved, lean in now and feel the weight of this instant, because what is unfolding is not information meant to pass through your ears and vanish, but a living transmission meant to anchor itself into your breath, your posture, your decisions, your very sense of self, because the season you sensed approaching is no longer hovering at the edge of your awareness. It has crossed the threshold and is settling into you. And this is the moment where understanding stops being an idea and becomes an embodiment, where what you once knew intuitively now begins to live through you instinctively, shaping how you respond instead of react, how you remain steady while the world trembles, how your presence carries authority without aggression and peace without retreat. And this is not detachment from life, but dominion within it, because something sacred has stabilized inside you. And once this crossing is complete, there is no returning to who you were, only an expansion into who you were always meant to be. But hear me clearly, this expansion only unfolds if your heart stays open, undefended, and willing. Because these words were never meant to be common or casually encountered. They were not designed to arrive through ordinary channels or predictable timing. They were obstructed, delayed, resisted, pressed against by forces that sensed their potency and tried to smother them. Yet they could not remain hidden, because truth with this level of charge insists on being revealed, and now against every interference it has reached you. Not by chance, not by accident, but because this moment was written into your path long before you had language for it. And you exist now in an hour where the veil between realms grows thin, where the unseen presses closer to the seen, and opposition has worked tirelessly to blur this convergence. Yet nothing can cancel what has already been authorized. And the disruptions you notice, the pauses, the strange delays, the moments where momentum seemed to stall for no logical reason, those were not setbacks. They were indicators that something far larger than circumstance was at work. Because messages of this magnitude always encounter resistance before release. And those who were meant to hear were always meant to hear. And the timing was never negotiable. Because this is not content designed to entertain or temporarily inspire. This is a summons aimed directly at those who have felt an internal stirring they could not explain. A restlessness that wasn't anxiety. A pull that wasn't ambition. A quiet pressure building behind the ribs. And understand this: patience has been exercised. Preparation has been thorough. Observation has been careful. But now delay is no longer possible, because the signal is clear. The urgency is sacred, and the current of life itself is accelerating. Everything that has been searching for alignment is snapping into place, and the appointed moment is not approaching. It has arrived, and if you felt an unnamed unease recently, an invisible tug that disrupted your normal rhythm, that was not imagination. It was awakening, because the waiting phase has ended. The training interval is complete, and now engagement begins. Not as a phase, but as a turning point, because time itself is being compressed on behalf of those who are ready. And what once required years will now unfold in moments. Doors will appear without explanation. Connections will form without an effort. Clarity will replace confusion almost overnight, because the destined hour for those aligned is no longer future tense. It is present reality. And this is not rehearsal. This is activation, spoken not to induce fear, but to awaken resolve. Because if you've sensed that something significant is about to break open, you are perceiving accurately. And before this day fully closes, a shift will occur that cannot be explained by surface logic, unnoticed by many yet unmistakable to you. Because while others will attribute the turbulence of the world to randomness, you will recognize pattern, meaning, signal. And this message is not warning of catastrophe, but confirmation that preparation has concluded and purpose has commenced. And with that purpose comes an outpouring of favor that challenges complacency and dismantles illusions that kept you small. Because sometimes revelation is disruptive by design, shaking loose what no longer belongs. And before this cycle completes, an event will ripple across both realms, not engineered by human strategy, but released by higher decree. And it may register as disorder, as malfunction, as disruption. But to those who are attuned, it will register as clarity, because expect anomalies, systems behaving unpredictably, insights arriving suddenly, because these are reverberations of a boundary opening. ancient passages unsealing, channels of calling and grace reopening after long dormancy, and you will sense it internally before any external confirmation appears. So do not wait for headlines or validation. Trust the recognition already stirring within you, because if you ever ask for a sign, this is it. The tremor that realigns trajectories and draws those who have been hidden into visibility. And the signs are already present, though invisible to those not yet awake, misnamed as glitches or coincidence. But you will see them as markers because structures are shifting. Time feels distorted. People sense imbalance without language for it. And this is the unmistakable signature of intentional movement, stirring the atmosphere to ready those who belong to this hour. And this is not an ending, but a deepening. Not separation, but elevation, because you are not being removed from the world, but infused within it, strengthened, clarified, marked, and the change will be evident enough that others will ask what happened to you without understanding the answer. Because you are not leaving your path, you are being lifted within it, and it begins internally, then expresses outwardly. And this elevation is bringing forward those long overlooked, those who gave quietly, served unseen, remained faithful without applause. And nothing you offered in obscurity was missed, because remembrance is now active and recognition is preparing to manifest. Not through conventional channels or noisy platforms, but through precise orchestration, sudden acknowledgement, accelerated alignment, and paths reconfigured in a single breath. Because you trusted when evidence was absent, persisted when reward was delayed, and now illumination turns toward you. Because the selection has always favored sincerity over spectacle, depth over display, loyalty over loudness. And if you ever wondered whether your endurance mattered, this is your answer, because recompense is approaching, not as luck, but as alignment. And this movement does not stop at emotion, but extends into provision, authority, and influence. Because abundance is being released not for indulgence, but for impact, entrusted to those who will steward it with integrity. And if you have known scarcity, constriction, just enough to survive, prepare yourself, because supply is shifting, arriving through inspired routes rather than manipulation, through alignment rather than striving, because insight will open doors you did not knock on. Opportunities will find you rather than the other way around, because resourcing follows readiness. And this is not a moment for distraction or spiritual sleep, because summons may arrive quietly and require immediate response, meaning readiness must be maintained now, not later, through clarity of heart, discipline of attention, and alignment of life. Because preparedness is not fear-based, but harmony-based. And when the opening appears, you must be able to step through without hesitation, because uncertainty is dissolving, discernment is sharpening, and where delay once ruled, now decisive movement emerges. And you will see why certain doors closed, why some connections ended, why certain seasons felt empty, because they were clearing space for resonance. And as this knowing settles, aligned relationships will form naturally, while draining ones fall away without drama. And together with those meant to walk with you, momentum will multiply, because this reordering is swift, compressing timelines, manifesting intentions, advancing purpose rapidly. And what felt like stagnation was actually reinforcement, strengthening you for speed, because when acceleration comes, it requires stability. And when the opening appears, you must move, not analyze, because self-doubt has expired, concealment has ended, and this is the genesis of visible expression, even if you feel unqualified by external standards. Because readiness is not measured by perfection, but by alignment. And this is your interval to speak clearly, love openly, create boldly, and move without apology, because storehouses are opening. Not empty, but overflowing, releasing restoration for body, peace for mind, renewal for spirit, and support for calling. And you are not entering lack, but sufficiency and overflow. And you do not need to beg for what has already been authorized, because timing, not denial, govern the delay, and now access is granted, because nothing you did in secret was wasted. And while others chased recognition, you cultivated resonance. And now the cycle turns, because this elevation is not self-exalting, but declarative, demonstrating that alignment opens what effort cannot. And with elevation comes grace that confounds logic, placing you where others are blocked, opening doors others cannot access. Because favor becomes your covering, accomplishing what striving never could. And this favor is not temporary but purpose-bound, because guidance is awakening within you, not dominance but clarity, not control but service. Because leadership here means integrity under pressure, vision without compromise, an authority that settles naturally rather than demands attention. And even if you cannot yet see the reach of your influence, movement is already occurring beyond your awareness, aligning you with those who can accelerate your impact. And these connections will form with ease, not friction, and recognition will arrive with responsibility, requiring humility and consistency, because this is not just about increase but stewardship. And now purification has completed and outpouring begins, touching relationships, health, resources, and direction. Because scarcity gives way to supply, debt dissolves, provision multiplies, and capacity expands. Not as spectacle, but as sustainability, and restoration extends into broken bonds and weary hearts. Because wholeness is comprehensive, and movement becomes effortless as obstacles dissolve. And your role is to remain aligned, receptive, and responsive. Because speed without alignment creates chaos, but speed with alignment creates clarity. And this is a time of new creation, paths appearing where none existed, refreshment in dry places, courage replacing fear, and presence anchoring progress. Because this call is not approaching, it is now. And if you sense it, answer it, because your readiness matters, your response matters, and this emergence is personal, precise, and irreversible. And this moment is unlike previous moments, because it carries a truth tailored specifically to you. And if emotion rises without explanation, that is recognition, because you have outgrown former patterns and anticipation replaces comfort. Because you are marked for purpose, and what you restrain within is now being invited forward, because you are not waiting to become ready. You are ready and waiting for permission, and this is that permission. And the air itself feels different because convergence is underway, revealing the strength that was always yours, dissolving fear, restoring memory, and inviting release of outdated attachments. Because this era is fixed, not fleeting, and the coming days carry significance. Because when they pass, the version of you built on mere survival fades, replaced by one grounded in truth. Because sorrow was not abandonment, but misalignment. And stillness is now your ally, because understanding arrives whole rather than analyzed. And speed is not loss of control, but evidence of orchestration. And you are not observing this. You are participating because your existence is intentional, and clarity is already present within you, waiting to be trusted. And now that you have received this transmission, let it move through you. Share it with those who resonate, return to this alignment daily, and mark this moment by choosing readiness. Because you are surrounded, guided, upheld, and accompanied. And your path unfolds now with grace, purpose, and undeniable momentum. And this is not the end of a message, but the beginning of a movement, and you are already in motion. Because once momentum has been initiated at this level, it does not pause to ask whether the mind feels prepared. It simply carries the willing forward. And right now you are standing inside a current that responds not to hesitation, but to resonance. And this is why everything inside you is being asked to come into coherence. Because fragmentation cannot survive where alignment is required, and what you are entering next demands wholeness, not perfection, but honesty at the deepest level. Because the days ahead will test not your strength, but your willingness to trust what you already know and understand this clearly. You are not being rushed. You are being synchronized, because speed without alignment shatters, but alignment naturally accelerates. And you are now aligned in a way you have never been before. Not because circumstances improved, but because your inner posture shifted, and that shift is irreversible. Because once awareness expands, it does not collapse back into sleep. It only refines itself. And you will notice this refinement in subtle ways at first. The way certain conversations suddenly feel hollow. The way old fears no longer grip you with the same authority. The way your intuition speaks more quickly than your doubt. And this is not because danger has disappeared, but because discernment has awakened, and discernment changes everything, because it allows you to move through complexity without being consumed by it. And hear this, the next phase will not look dramatic on the surface at first. It will look deceptively ordinary, almost quiet, because power often arrives softly before it reveals its full force. And those who are impatient miss it. But those who are attentive feel it settling like gravity inside their chest. And that gravity is what will keep you grounded when acceleration increases. Because acceleration is coming, not as chaos, but as convergence, where multiple streams of your life that once felt disconnected suddenly merge into a single direction. And when that happens, you will realize that nothing was wasted. Not the delays, not the detours, not the disappointments, not even the seasons where you question your own value, because every experience contributed to your capacity to hold what is coming. And capacity is the true measure of readiness. Because it is not enough to desire expansion, you must be able to sustain it, and you have been quietly built for sustainability, forged through endurance rather than excitement, through consistency rather than applause, and that is why what comes next will last, because it is rooted, not inflated, and as this unfolds, you may feel moments of emotional intensity that seem disproportionate to what is happening externally. Waves of gratitude, sudden tears, inexplicable joy, or even brief flashes of grief for what you are leaving behind. And all of this is normal because transformation involves release as much as reception. And you are releasing identities that kept you safe but small, strategies that worked in survival mode but cannot function in expansion mode, and relationships that were built around who you were rather than who you are becoming. And this release does not require confrontation or explanation. It requires permission for yourself to move forward without dragging the past to justify your future. And that permission is being granted now, because you no longer need external validation to authorize your next step. You carry that authorization within you, and this is why your choices will begin to feel cleaner, simpler, more decisive. Not because life becomes easy, but because your alignment reduces inner conflict, and inner conflict is what exhausts most people, not effort itself. And as that conflict dissolves, you will find that your energy returns, your focus sharpens, your creativity flows more freely, and you begin to recognize opportunities not as rare events, but as natural byproducts of being in the right frequency. Because opportunity is not random, it is responsive. It responds to clarity, to readiness, to coherence. And you are becoming coherent, and coherence is magnetic. It draws people, resources, and timing into alignment without force. And this is why you must guard your internal environment carefully now, because sensitivity increases with alignment, and what you consume emotionally, mentally, spiritually will have a stronger impact than before. Not because you are weaker, but because you are more open, and openness is power when guided, but vulnerability when neglected. So choose deliberately what you allow into your attention, because attention is the gateway through which reality enters your experience, and you are learning to steward it wisely. And stewardship is a recurring theme now. Stewardship of your time, your energy, your voice, your influence. Because influence is expanding, whether you seek it or not. And influence without intention becomes burden. But influence with intention becomes legacy. And legacy is not built in grand gestures, but in consistent alignment with truth. And this is why you're being drawn back to simplicity even as your life expands. Because simplicity keeps you anchored, it keeps you real, it keeps you human, and you will need that humanity as doors open that once seemed unreachable. Because elevation without humility isolates, but elevation with humility connects. And connection is essential for what you are being called into. Because this is not a solo ascent, it is a collective impact. Even if your role is unique, because what you carry is meant to ripple outward, touching lives you may never meet directly. And that ripple begins with how you show up in ordinary moments, how you speak when no one is watching, how you choose integrity over convenience, how you listen more than you perform, because the unseen habits shape the visible outcomes, and you have been practicing unseen faithfulness for a long time, and now visibility is increasing, and visibility will test whether your inner life can support outer recognition. And that is why this preparatory phase was so long, because collapse happens when structure cannot bear weight. and you are being built to bear weight.